Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I hope everybody had a great week. Of course, if you are following the stock market, then it was a little difficult to have a good week. I think everybody lost this week, and my prediction is everybody's going to continue to lose for a while. It's going to be a very rough 2016. And I'm going to get into that maybe a little bit more in the show. I know I've talked about global finances and oil and China and the devaluation of their currency and the strength of the dollar recently, but I think I need to say a couple more things today before the show's over. I meant to get to it yesterday, just did not have enough time. On the good side, if there is any good news out there, I discovered that this story out there of one of the people who won the Powerball from Wednesday night. One of the stories was a hoax, thank goodness. I talked about it yesterday. I guess I fell for the hoax. That doesn't happen too often in my world, but I guess I did, maybe because it fit my mood right now. But that is that this young guy, this 27-year-old, did not spend $30,000 and won Powerball, used $30,000 to buy tickets and won Powerball. That was a hoax. And in fact, the winner of the Powerball in California, in Chino Hills, California, ended up being a nurse who got the ticket from a boss, somebody as a gift or something, like a supervisor, and hit it. So that makes me feel a little bit better. I did see before I went on the air today that a couple in Tennessee won it, and they've gone to collect their money. I don't know if their name is going to come out, and I guess the only person left is whoever won it here in Florida. So I haven't heard any of my friends. I haven't seen anything on Facebook, any of my Florida people as to if they know who it was. So I'm going to guess it's not somebody in the Tampa area. However, maybe it was. I just not connected to that person through 6 degrees of separation, like that game you can play, that movie game you can play concerning Kevin Bacon. So, glad to see some rich kid who spent $30,000 did not win Powerball. That kind of made my day because there's not much good news out there. Before I get started, I remind you can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between, if you'd like to get in touch with me, and I would love for you to do that. Let's get to the show. Have to do a little post-debate talk. I think that it went pretty much as I predicted. The way this show is set up is that I record it. I recorded it before the debate started last night. So when you did listen to my show, it was after the debate, but here I am talking about before the debate. I know that can get a little confusing. It's almost some sort of time warp situation, time travel circumstance. But I can assure you it's not that. That's just the way the show is set up. Pretty much went the way I thought. And it's interesting going to the different websites that I go to and reading who did, like National Review, Hot Air, Free Beacon, Drudge Report, Breitbart. You know the popular ones that I go to. How each website has a different opinion as to who won, who did the best, who did the worst. The only consensus was that coming out of the debate, there's really only 3 people left. And that is Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio. And pretty much of those 3, it's Ted Cruz and Donald Trump vying for that first spot, and Marco Rubio kind of in a distant third. So tied for first and then a distant third. You can't say he's tied for second, but back in second, but a distant third, but definitely still in the race. The other guys, Ben Carson, he continued to put on a lackluster performance. Doesn't seem that the shakeup in his campaign has helped at all. And in fact, I read something before the debate happened yesterday that somebody else left his campaign. Other major person in a position of power within his campaign left. So he's falling apart, and it kind of showed in the debate. Chris Christie, some people thought he had a great debate. Some people not so much. Jeb Bush, I read that he had his best debate so far, but didn't really do much to help himself. John Kasich was his usual self. So for those other four candidates, Bush, Carson, Kasich, and Christie, it's pretty much more the same, about the same what they're going to get out of it, which may not be a lot. I'm not saying their numbers are going to go down. I just don't think that it matters at this point. I think that maybe Christie or Jeb Bush maybe will have a resurgence when New Hampshire gets closer. But for now, those other four are surely out of the running in Iowa. It's come down to a Cruz versus Trump, and then Rubio making sure that he comes in a strong third place. Now, as far as between Donald Trump and Chris Christie and Ted Cruz, interesting, not unexpected. But the problem I have with both of them, both of Donald Trump with his accusations against Ted Cruz and whether he's actual natural-born citizen, then Ted Cruz's attacks on Donald Trump with his New York values, I know what each are doing. I think that in Donald Trump's case, he's knowing that he has to stay away from Ted Cruz regarding policy. Now, it may be that Donald Trump thinks that he has the upper hand regarding immigration with Ted Cruz, because there are the allegations out there. What did Ted Cruz really mean when he added that piece of legislation onto the Gang of Eight bill? What did it mean? Has he changed his reasoning for it over time since it happened? Has left him open, and Marco Rubio's tried to expose that, specifically in not the debate yesterday, but the last debate back in December. But Donald Trump knows that if I get into it with Ted Cruz regarding actual policy on immigration, and then that may spread over into other issues of policy where Donald Trump doesn't feel as secure, and he knows that Ted Cruz can run rings around him, which is true. That is objectively true. So Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, isn't going to attack Ted Cruz regarding immigration because of where that may go. But if he can stick to something personal, like Ted Cruz's birth, and if he's a natural-born citizen, nobody's arguing that Ted Cruz isn't a citizen of the United States. It's whether he was a natural-born citizen who can then become president of the United States. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger, kind of. Arnold Schwarzenegger became an American citizen, but he's not a natural-born citizen, which excludes him from becoming president. But he is a citizen. He could be governor of California, and he can vote. As far as running for president, that's just a higher level of citizenship, as we define it in the United States. And so Donald Trump, he's going to attack Ted Cruz on anything. It has to be something like that. Now, the advantage that Donald Trump has is he's been there before in regards to the birther issue when the topic was Barack Obama, where it was other people, unknown people, who were looking into Barack Obama's origins and where he was born. And then Donald Trump kind of got out in front of it like he can because he's a well-known person, rich guy. He's been around for decades. He can do that. Really attached his wagon to the birther issue and hammered Barack Obama on that for a while and then kind of just let it go. So he has experience. So I'm sure that's the way he's looking at it. And it doesn't matter that Donald Trump has changed his mind regarding Ted Cruz's natural-born citizenship from a couple years ago or 6 months ago till now. Donald Trump is going to do that, and he feels comfortable doing that. Likewise, Ted Cruz, with his New York values, we know what he means, but in both cases, Donald Trump's accusations toward Ted Cruz's accusations toward Donald Trump, I don't know who any of this helps. I know it helps the candidates themselves personally, but I'm not sure that either of those arguments can have any long-term effects. What I do know, though, is that there may be Democrats who latch on to Donald Trump's accusations against Ted Cruz and might continue to exploit them from now to whenever. Now, whether that's going to work, I don't know. What I know is neither of those arguments between either of them really has anything to do with what's going on in the United States. Now, I realize why Donald Trump is doing what he does, because that's who he is, and I think personally he feels shaky on the issues. Ted Cruz, a little harder to understand. To me, Ted Cruz is as good as a conservative as you're going to get running for president. Not a perfect guy. I understand the concerns that people have with his presentation. It's a little bit too like late night TV, 1 o'clock in the morning, preacher asking for money. I get that. It doesn't turn me off because I believe he believes what he's saying. I believe that he's going to follow through with what he wants to do. Who knows what kind of Congress he's going to have. But I think, all in all, he's as conservative, a true conservative, as we're going to get this time around. However, as you know, I don't go to any rallies. I don't send any money. I don't go to any Tea Party events. And I don't support any specific candidate. But I think it's wrong on Ted Cruz's part if that's the best he can do with New York, quote-unquote, New York values and Donald Trump. I know what he's saying and went on to expound pro-abortion, pro-high taxes, anti-business, and the problems that New York City has or has had and the state of New York has had. And I know that any of those Republicans, including Donald Trump, is going to have a tough time winning New York this time around. So maybe Ted Cruz looks at it and figures, you know what, if I get to the nomination, I'm not going to win New York anyway, so the heck with it. I might as well make fun of New Yorkers. Maybe. But I think a better attack on Donald Trump would be just focusing on how Donald Trump has flip-flopped over the years. And it's weird to me that we are so far into this fight for the nomination, and that still is kind of a back seat. I can understand that people, the guys up on the stage, not that they're necessarily afraid of Donald Trump, but I think they know that Donald Trump is going to go places that other people won't. But I don't think that you can allow that to influence you. I've told you, I still think the best way to handle all of this is just get up here and do your own business. Say what you got to say, and if you're attacked, you defend yourself. It just seems to me that Ted Cruz defending himself by going after Donald Trump's New York values is a very high risk play. It's not, I don't think, the best choice. I don't know whose mind you're going to change, because something like that needs to be both going on offense. It's part defense and going on offense. And what I mean is you defend yourself at the same time going after your opponent, but in the way that you think can bring people to your side. I don't know who is going to hear Ted Cruz's New York values argument and say, "Oh yeah, I can't vote for Donald Trump." That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not saying there isn't one person who heard that and changed his mind. I think that maybe there was, but surely the costs involved. It feels to me like investing $1 million to make $100. And for Donald Trump and his attack on Ted Cruz and the citizenship, does he not understand? It's hard for me to put myself in his position, other than to say he has to do that because he's afraid of doing anything else. So it's interesting back and forth between the two. This is going to continue. I buy into the belief that if Donald Trump doesn't win Iowa, that's going to be a ding on his and him portraying himself as being inevitable as the nominee. I think that if he doesn't win in Iowa, that it's going to hurt his chances in New Hampshire. Because Iowa's a very purplish state. This is the problem I have with starting the Republican nomination process in the state in the first place. That states should be rewarded according to how much they vote Republican, not according to some tradition that goes back decades or even longer. And Donald Trump's argument has been that he can pull in everybody. He can get Democrats, he can get moderate Republicans, he can get conservatives. Well, Iowa should be the perfect place to do that, because they are very purplish there. And that he has not been if he was running the way he's running in Iowa, and instead it was, a state that, it's hard to compare them right now, but let's say that he was doing this in Tennessee, and he was this close to the front, then that would be something. That would be noteworthy. And I don't want to hear, well, he's doing well in South Carolina, look at his polls. Those, my state of Florida, they're not being contested yet. That's right now, that is so far down the road for any of these candidates. I know that they're running ads here in other states. I know they've made appearances in the other states. But right now, their main concentration is on Iowa, and then after that, New Hampshire, and then they'll get serious, and then we'll know what the real poll numbers are in some of the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh states. But if it was Tennessee and Iowa instead of Iowa, and all these guys were putting their efforts into Tennessee, and Donald Trump was coming in, close second among Tennessee people who live in Tennessee who are considerably more conservative than Iowans are, then that's something. And I would give all the credit to Donald Trump, and I would think, you know what, now I think that, he really has a chance of winning the nomination. I'm not happy about that, but that would just be a fact. But that he's running second behind a conservative in Iowa should be, I think, a little worrisome to Trump supporters. And I think it goes back to something I said a couple days ago, that Donald Trump's ground game there and elsewhere is not very good. I think that he is relying totally on the cult of his personality for people to just show up. And that's not the way it works. It's not the way politics works, and we all know that in our own personal lives, that we have friends who say they're all excited about doing something, that we're going to go here, we're going to go there, and then when the day comes, well, you know what, I really got to cut the grass. And you know what, I got to take my dog to the vet, and I forgot that told my wife that I was supposed to do this today. That's what happens when you don't have a ground game. Those people can get away with excuses like that. Quote-unquote excuses. People need to be pushed to show up because they have to get in their car. Might be raining out, might be snowing out, some dark night. Might have to drive. In Iowa, who knows how far you have to drive. And then stand around with a bunch of people in a crowded room. Maybe sees people that you don't care for. Maybe you're just in a bad mood that day and you don't feel like, as a Trump supporter, arguing with some Trump or Cruz supporter who has a sign outside. Maybe you got a little sneeze going, a little allergy, a little cough. Just don't want to show up. And all of those things, those little teeny-weeny things that people will ignore if they have to show up for their job, that they'll definitely pay attention to them if it means that they have to go out and go somewhere that they usually wouldn't have to the rest of the year. They'd have to go do something they normally wouldn't have to do, no matter how much support they expressed over these past months. Maybe that is being expressed in these poll numbers in Iowa. Well, I know that Donald Trump is not getting blown out there, but Iowa should be, despite New York, Donald Trump coming from New York, the demographics of Iowa should be that Donald Trump does very well there, considering what everybody thinks they know about Iowa. And that's not really, what has gone on. So we'll see. But I'm not really sure that any viewers who watched that exchange between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump really got anything out of it. It sounds to me like Ted Cruz got the best of the argument on the birther issue, even going so far to say that Donald Trump should be excluded because of Donald Trump's mother and where she was born. Or what her nationality was, I should say. To Donald Trump seemingly getting the better of the New York values argument with Ted Cruz. I think that you're going to see on Ted Cruz's part that he's probably going to ditch that. I would hope so. Hopefully, if he's as smart as everybody says he is, that he can come up with something better than that. And in Donald Trump's part, to look at this objectively, I'd like to see him and Ted Cruz get into a deep discussion about immigration. That would be interesting to me. Even though I prefer Ted Cruz over Donald Trump, and Donald Trump seems to have the better position, I still don't know if you can trust a word he says, but that would be interesting. The viewers didn't get that last night. And I think Marco Rubio expressed the feelings probably of himself and all the other people in the auditorium and everybody watching or listening. He said, can we end this episode of Court TV, or what he ended up saying, which is a pretty good line. Now, moving on to the other fight that went on, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz regarding immigration, kind of part two of what they got into in the last debate in December, still kind of seems like Ted Cruz is getting the best of Marco Rubio, but I'm not so sure that anybody even knows now. It didn't get quite as bad as in December, where Chris Christie had to finally say, here's what's wrong with the United States Senate. It didn't get that bad, but I think people's eyes start glazing over, and the Gang of Eight, 95% of the people who are watching that debate have no idea who the Gang Eight is and what the circumstances were. But it's obvious to me that Marco Rubio does see his immigration stance as a weakness, even though he seemingly has no problem talking about it. It's just when he talks about it, he talks around it. It's not so much that he changes the subject so much, but there's certainly a little bit of revisionist history, and that's what goes on between those two, between Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. But I think you pretty much got what you wanted. I think that we saw the breakdown of the bromance between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. And this is going to be a good test for the Republican Party. And I don't mean the leadership, I mean your average Republican out there, maybe who isn't as conservative as I am, but would not consider himself or herself to be a moderate rhino squish. But that's because that's going to be who Ted Cruz and Donald Trump are going to be fighting for. That person right now probably is in the Marco Rubio camp. And we'll see if Marco Rubio can hang on to those people. It may be that, I'm still in the back of my head thinking, if Ted Cruz wins the nomination, whether it's by the end, what did he say? The race is going to be done by the end of March. Remember, he said that last week or the week before. I still believe, despite what Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio have done, I still think that Marco Rubio has to rate very high on Ted Cruz's choices for vice president. It has to be. That has to be the case. And likewise, Marco Rubio can weasel in there, and I don't mean weasel in a bad way, but kind of work his way in there, just doing his business. I happen to believe that Ted Cruz has to be high on his list of vice presidential choices. So we have to put their arguments in context because, as you may not know, those two guys off the stage, I guess, get along pretty well, and that's saying something considering how many people dislike Ted Cruz in the United States Senate. And should I say, that alone should cause the average Republican to say Ted Cruz is the guy for me. If he's disliked in the Senate, we know it's been going on in the Senate for too long now. If he's disliked by a large majority of those senators, he should be the guy. Because there's nothing that says anti-establishment more than being hated by your fellow senators. Dare I say it. And in fact, it's safe to say that Donald Trump probably has more friends in the United States Senate than Ted Cruz does. And Marco Rubio probably is somewhere in between. So, that's the debate. That's what I've gotten out of it. Watched a couple clips, read some transcripts. Did not watch it. In fact, I had somebody tweet me last night so I could fill them in, and I said, I'm sorry, but I just have other things going on tonight. And that was the truth. I just did not have an opportunity to watch it. I had other things going on with family and otherwise. So, just didn't get a chance to watch it. And as I've told you before, I don't watch it even if I have a choice, unless I'm going to do a show on it like I did last month on somebody else's show. Because it drives me nuts. It just does. I like these people for the most part. But when I watch them respond to these questions, and I thought the moderators, from what I can tell, reading no criticism of the moderators last night, that for any way I could see, Neil Cavuto, that Bartiromo chick, is that nice to put it that way? Probably not. They did a fine job. Maybe better than Fox Business did last time. All likable people up on that stage, maybe except for Donald Trump, and it's more personal with me. But maybe I'm just a complete arrogant, idiot. But I really do believe I could do a better job than those people do when they're up there answering the questions. So that's why I don't. Within 10 minutes, I'll just be pulling my hair out. So, but I think we got what we wanted last night, and I predict the next debate is going to be even better. I guess there is one more before New Hampshire, from what I understand. So, I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
You're listening to Red State Talk Radio, America's premier conservative talk radio network.
You critics don't define our honor. You try to shame us for doing our job. You teach children to fear us, crowds to attack us, and good people to doubt us. But we will never back down from our sworn duty to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. We wake up every day, put on our badge, strap a gun to our hips, kiss our families goodbye, and put our lives between the law-abiding and any criminal who threatens their rights. We serve people of every color and creed, men, women, and children in violent, dangerous neighborhoods, because they have the same right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as CEOs, movie stars, and the political elite. We are Americans, and we are the American police officer. We stand with the National Rifle Association of America, and the NRA stands with us. Together, we're freedom's safest place.
I know. We Christians are just as bad as Muslims who fly planes into buildings and video themselves sawing people's heads off and beheading kids and mutilating women and shooting people who draw cartoons. That's right. You better be just as wary of us Christians, because we don't mess around. Don't be insulting our Jesus, because you think Muslims are bad. Oh, man, don't push us. You think the Muslims are bad when they prey on people for insulting Muhammad? You're really going to get it when Christians pray for you for insulting Jesus.
It could be easy to take what we have for granted and not appreciate everything the men and women of law enforcement do for us every day. So to all my heroes out there, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for protecting my family,
my business,
my kids,
our community.
Thank you for listening to us,
for being there for me, for keeping me safe.
To all those in law enforcement, thank you.
This is Primo Mondoni, host of the Red State Town Hall. Join me Sundays at 11 p.m. Eastern on Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. So, lock it in and rip the knob off.
This is Paul Preston, host of Agenda 21 Radio. Join me Monday through Friday on Red State Talk Radio, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio. So lock it in and rip the knob off.
And we are back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. During the break, I needed to check and see. Yes, there is one more debate before the Iowa caucuses. That debate is on January 28th. So 2 weeks, 13 days, I guess 2 weeks from yesterday since this past debate. And it will be in Iowa. So I fully expect it to be more the same. I think that the poll numbers will change between now and then. And however those polls change will be a direct reflection, will reflect on how the candidates approach that debate. We'll just have to see. I think if Ted Cruz is out ahead, if he distances himself from Donald Trump, I think that you can anticipate that he's probably going to play keep away, try to play nice with the rest of the group on stage, while Donald Trump, Marco Rubio are going to go at him really hard. If Donald Trump is in the lead, I think the same thing is going to happen. It's definitely going to get it to a situation where it's king of the hill. One of them is going to be on the top of the hill, and the other ones are all going to be trying to get to the top. They are going to have to be the aggressive ones. Or you want to use a basketball analogy. Can't do it in the pros or college anymore, but in high school they don't have a shot clock. You have a team that is ahead. They'll just play keep away the basketball. They'll just keep passing it back and forth up near mid-court in a way to stall and just run out the clock. That may be what you see on the next debate on January 28th regarding whoever is in the lead. Just depends on how safe that lead is. If it's just a point or two, then I don't know if that whoever's in the lead can afford to do that. But if it's 5 or 6 points, then you can expect whoever has that 5 or 6 point lead to go in there, just put on a big smile, be friendly, be non-controversial, kind of wipe some of the attacks against himself off and say, oh, you're just so cute. We'll just have to see. Let's move on to something else. I guess I can talk about this now. I was going to talk about it yesterday, but as I am recording the show right now, the Dow is down over 400 points, and the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 are in the crapper as well. Gas is down to, right now, oil is down to $29.70 a barrel. And you listen to, I go to zerohedge.com, which I just don't know. See, I get suspicious when I don't know the people who are posting. And there, everybody posts under the same name, Tyler Durden, which was the name of Brad Pitt's character, who was an imaginary character, not to ruin it for all of you, in the movie Fight Club. And the comment section at zerohedge.com you get the idea that the average person posting on there is a 16-year-old weed smoker sitting in his mother's basement. Even though there may be some good information there from some of the posters. But when I don't know who these posters are and what their backgrounds are and what business they're in, I hesitate to listen to any of them. Because I just don't know them. They just could be pulling stuff right out of the air, making things up, just posting charts out there and reading it for themselves with no background. I just don't know. But I go to CNBC, I go to Fox Business, and we've gotten to the point. See, I started this kind of rant a few years ago, well before there was any sign that the markets were going to go in the opposite direction. And dare I say it, there's a lot of people who are going to be hurting this year if markets continue the way they are, including yours truly. It could be a very, very, very bad year for all of us, including myself. The real problem is that you can't get any good information. Nobody really knows what's going on. And this goes back to something I talked about a few years ago, well before I ever ended up on Red State Talk Radio, is that the expertise of the business person, the financial expert in the United States. Now, those people who we consider to be the shakers and movers in our economy, those people who start their own businesses and become famous, they just aren't of the highest quality, I think, compared to back at the times of Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, and all of those guys. And I think that this has spread to the financial sector as well. I always like to bring up somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, who is worth more money than I could live on this earth for 1,000 years and not make as much money as he is worth. Started Facebook. Gets a lot of credit for that. Seen as a genius and everything else. The problem is with Facebook is that nobody would pay to use it. Every once in a while, they're probably hoaxes, but it comes out, Facebook's going to start charging people $1 a month to use it. And you see this outrage of people even paying $1 a month to use Facebook, allegedly something that they really, really like. They'll spend $5 a day at Starbucks, but they won't spend $1 a month on Facebook, even though Facebook is supposed to be the greatest invention so far of the 21st century. Same way with YouTube. YouTube's trying to make some of its parts of its website pay. I don't know how that's going. Probably not too well. Twitter, that was supposed to be such a great, and I'm on there, and it's a great tool. There's no doubt about it. It's great for meeting people, marketing, but the value of it, the inherent value of it, is not as high as everybody thought, even though the person who created it is once again seen as some sort of genius. And no doubt the person obviously latched on something that's very creative, and there is a business model for Twitter, but it surely wasn't as valuable as everybody thought it was. The same way with Facebook. You know how Facebook makes money? On ads and selling your information. That's how it makes money. Same way with Google. I've often made the example of Facebook is the version, imagine this, let's put it this way. Imagine if Henry Ford went into the car business, and instead of selling cars, he made the cars, he gave them to people for free, but the way he paid for his operation was that companies that were big at the time would get to advertise on those cars. So when a Model T came out of the factory, instead of being black, it would have all the logos of different companies who are paying to put their name on the car. And then Henry Ford makes this money from that. He doesn't get the money from actually selling the car. He just gets the money from the advertising. He gives the cars away. What do you think that would have done to the automobile industry? How do you think that those people would have treated the cars that they didn't pay for? Now, there's no doubt that more people would be driving cars. I mean, when you give them away for free, I mean, what are you going to do? People are just going to be lining up down the street. But what would have done with the car industry? Would there have been any innovation? There wouldn't be any innovation when people are getting cars. They'd just be happy to have it. I got a car for free. Awesome. Because people, when they have skin in the game, when they actually pay for something, then they start worrying about the quality of it. Well, that's kind of what's going on in the 21st century on the internet. People are getting all of this information for free. And because of that, the quality of it suffers. There is no doubt in my mind about this. And you have to remember that Facebook hasn't been around very long. YouTube hasn't been around for very long. We'll see where they are in 100 years. We'll see if they can keep up what Ford Motor Company and all these other corporations that are still around 100 years later have been able to stick around. We'll see. But so these guys who have created these websites and these social media sites and Uber and the rest of them, they're so smart that it seems that nobody wants to pay for them. Even something like Uber, which is kind of ingenious, it's everybody using their own cars, and I have nothing necessarily against it. That is the free market system. But to think that it's valued in the hundreds of millions, $1 billion is crazy. It's crazy. And so I think that this kind of false worship of these people has led over into areas of our business, our economy, where getting something right and actually knowing something about how markets work means something. Because I listen to all these people, and I have a business background. I'm fairly smart. I like reading about economics. And it doesn't seem to me any of these people know what the heck they're talking about. And I know that they're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to issue their opinions. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. It's somewhere in between. Oil going down, well, it's because of supply. No, it's because of demand. No, it's because of deflation. It's because of the Iranians. No, it's because of Saudi Arabia. No, it's because of this. It's because of that. And then I start thinking, is this just another version of like a political show? Is this just a version of what you'd see on regular Fox News or CNN where they invite hosts on just to fight, just to argue? So you get the Republican on there, you get the Democrat on there, and they just let those two go at each other for 5 minutes. Because it seems to me, if you have a financial background and you've passed all the tests, and I know they're very difficult to become a stockbroker, to sell mutual funds, and to get into that business. It's not just like you get your college degree and jump right into it. It's a little more difficult than that. And I'm going to take for granted that the most of these people who are talking about all of this have that kind of background, and they can't agree as to what's actually going on. That makes me suspicious. And what it tells me is that it's more opinions on what they're saying and not based on any sort of facts or any sort of information that's out there. It makes me very, very suspicious. And I start wondering, do they do this because they don't know? Are they being instructed that we have to be entertaining, so we need to have differences of opinion for viewership? I think of like the ESPN way of, even though I haven't watched any of those shows for years, but I know that they get on there, these columnists, one will say one thing, and the other guy will say the exact opposite. And they have exact opposite opinions every day. You'd think these two people never agree. Well, at some point you have to start thinking, this is just scripted. The producers don't want these guys who run this sports show to agree, so they instruct one of them, you say this, the other one says that. How do I know that this isn't going on in all of these financial shows as well? And with all their education, all their experience, can't tell us how low oil is going to go, can't tell us how low it's possible that they tell us to look for these indicators. Well, if this means this and that means that. And, well, you've been doing this for 20 years. How don't you know? Is it a factor of you just not wanting to be wrong? And you're afraid of losing your cushy job to be on there in front of everybody, talking to everybody for an hour? No. I don't know. All I do know is if you watch any of these shows long enough, it'll drive you nuts. And I have to keep telling myself, don't watch this stuff as much as you do. And if we wanted to get down to, the problems that we have in the United States at a more fundamental level, is that these people who are leading us in the business sector, I'm not so sure they're as smart as we've made them out to be. It seems to me more that luck has come into play than any sort of business knowledge, anything like that. And it's great for them, but you can't take advice from somebody who got lucky. Right? They have nothing to offer. All they have are opinions because, well, does Mark Zuckerberg, with all of his money, know how business works any better than I do? I don't think so. He may be better at computers than I am. He may understand people's interest in social media more than I do. But I doubt he could run a 7-Eleven store any better than I could. And that's really what we need in this country. We need people who can manage the store, not people who just offer up opinions and get paid to do it, not knowing what they're talking about. You may say, well, isn't that what you do on your show? Well, there's a big difference. A lot of the time I'm right, and first of all, a lot of the time I am right. I believe that conservatism is right. And I think that it has a long track record. If you follow the conservative path, you are going to prosper. Your country is going to do very well. And that's why I'm a conservative. But with these people, I think that too many of them were a fan of quantitative easing, and now they regret it. But they maybe hope that it comes back. They were in favor of the Fed raising the rate, and now they're not so sure. Well, they're the experts. They're the ones who've been doing this for 20 years. They're the ones with all the education. And as you know, I don't give any stock advice on this show at all. I'm not playing with people's money and people's futures on this show regarding their money, whether they can go broke or not. I'm trying to make sure that people have the right information in their heads as to the political issues. And I don't think that's changed. I don't care if it's 2016 or 2001 or 1995 or 1983 or 1964. The conservatism is still always the best choice. And I'm not going to waver from that. And I think that these people do waver. I'm not sure that their messages are consistent. And that's why I have this big concern about if these are the types of people who are managing the economy, buying and selling stocks and everything else, well, then you understand why we have these boom and bust cycles and quantitative easing and Fed rates all over the place and a site like Zero Hedge where it seems like the articles are pretty good, but then you see the comment section, it seems like it's just a bunch of teenagers dropping F-bombs and, it just doesn't feel very mature and it doesn't feel very professional. And I think that's the issue that we have in the United States right now, and not just in the financial sector. I think we hold people in too high a regard who I'm not sure deserve it. Like Mark Cuban, owner of the Dallas Mavericks, from Pittsburgh, just like I am. Created one thing 20 years ago, sold it to somebody, and that's his claim to fame. And from that, he is who he is today. I'm not sure that his creation went anywhere. I'm not so sure that he has done anything spectacular, innovative in the economy in the last 15 years, but still people would go to him because he's some sort of expert. I don't get it. I don't understand. On top of the fact that we, of course, know that he's not a conservative either. The question I have is, does anybody really know anything anymore? Because it's through knowledge that you gain wisdom. And I just don't think we're very wise in the United States. And it may be for a lack of knowledge. We have a bunch of people who think they know stuff and don't. And are afraid to admit they don't know, which is the worst part. They're afraid to tell people that they don't know something, and so they fake it, and actually just gets everybody else in trouble. We don't talk about that enough on the conservative side. But we've come to the end of the show. I remind you, you can find my books at Amazon.com. You can go to EdwardDentzel.com, where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can go to EdwardDentzel.com/book to download the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks. You can find my shows at Podbean, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can also find them in the iTunes store in the podcast section. You can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.